Your mind and your memory are weird and wonderful things, and I focus a lot on the Magnetic Memory Method podcast about how to remember things, and not enough, sometimes I think, on the causes of forgetting and different ways that we can handle the things that cause us to forget quickly, effectively, and even efficiently so that you're not held back from acing exams or getting a job, or keeping a great job that you have, or even getting a raise or a promotion. These are very, very important things. You know, as a graduate student and later as a professor, I had to work on eliminating the various issues that harmed my memory. It wasn't just memory training and using memory palaces and advanced mnemonics. I'm talking about everything from improving my diet to dealing with childhood trauma. And these days, I battle aging, and I have to take action every day to keep my stress in check. And so, in this episode of the Magnetic Memory Method podcast, I'm going to share with you everything that I've learned about the causes of forgetting and everything I do as someone who writes blogs and podcasts for a living, which I have to tell you has always been a stressful thing that has always impacted my memory. No matter how much I train it, there is a low-level anxiety running all the time, because when you're a solopreneur or whatever you want to call it, it basically means that you've jumped out of an airplane without a parachute, right? It's just a wild experience, and it's been going on now for me for 15 years. So as a memory expert, I need to absolutely make sure that whatever is behind my forgetfulness is quickly and thoroughly handled, especially because I'm in the public about memory quite a bit. So by the end of this podcast, you're going to be able to handle the gremlins causing you to forget, and you'll have an insider view of taking that extra step, walking the extra mile from myself as someone who really has to demonstrate having better memory and just also own it when I make mistakes, because I do make mistakes. It's not about perfect memory. It's about better memory. So if you're ready, this is Dr. Anthony Metivier from magneticmerrymethod.com. Thanks for joining me. If you're new here, please make sure to get subscribed on whatever device you use to listen to this now so you don't miss a thing. This is all about better living through better memory. And I'm just always honored to have been running this project for so long, and I can't believe that it's been possible for so long. So it's really at the mercy of the people that it helps, and I am always grateful to be able to reach people and have them find that the way I teach memory techniques and the way I talk about memory at large resonates. So thanks for being part of it, and let's get started with one of the first reasons why we forget. And, actually, let's get a definition of forgetting, first of all, because maybe we're not on the same page about what that means. I would say that forgetting specifically means any situation where information that was once stored in the brain becomes inaccessible. And you can say, okay, Dr. Obvious, do we really have to slow down the gears of our progress here to focus on that definition? Well, yeah, I think we do, because memories can be lost temporarily or permanently, or maybe somewhere in between. There's kind of a gray area. So there's something that is sometimes called the ugly sister effect, where it's on the tip of your tongue, but every other possible answer is coming to mind. So you might be trying to think of the name of an actor, for example, and other actors' names are coming to mind, but not the one you're looking for. So is it lost temporarily or permanently, or is it stuck somewhere in the gears, right? So I think that's really fascinating to dig into these granular details. And, we also have to think about a definition of forgetting that allows for forgetting to be normal, to being a healthy part of our cognitive functioning. It's excessive forgetting that indicates issues that could be neurological in nature or indicate a health problem. So one of the number one things that you want to do is make sure that you actually check out any issues you're having with excessive forgetting with a doctor. It could be a thyroid issue. It could be something that is warning you about a situation that you could take action on now so that you have a much better future moving forward. So take forgetting very, very seriously. I'm sure there's many other ways to define it than I've just covered, But think about the definition. Things are not always so obvious. There's a lot of little areas to dig into, and you might come up with your own personal definition of forgetting that helps you better explain what's happening to a doctor if you have to speak with one, or even to a memory expert if you need to speak with one. One of the great gifts, but also the frustrations that I have as a person who educates people about memory is that sometimes people are not clear about what they're asking. They say, well, I'm forgetting a lot. Okay, well, forgetting what? And I just wish that people would ask questions in greater depth. And one of the things that I've noticed in the age of the internet is people apologize. They say, oh, I'm sorry that I wrote for so long. No. Please write at as much length as you absolutely must in order to explain what's going on. Context is so important in order to get down to the best possible solution. But if it's just like, well, I've noticed that I don't remember as well as I used to, that doesn't really help get the answer that we're looking for. What's the context? What kinds of information? Is it numbers? Is it names? Is it that you're reading and you have the feeling that, you just can't remember anything from the previous chapter or even the previous paragraph? Those things really, really matter because they suggest the path to a solution. Okay, so the first reason why we forget, or cause of forgetting, goes back to the 1950s. And the scientific work, if you want to read into it, I have links for all of the research that I'm referring to on the page on magneticmarymethod.com, and you can just search causes of forgetting and magnetic Mary method, and I'm sure it'll come up, or go to the site and search causes of forgetting, and there's a little search window there for you. And just rest assured that there's citations for everything, and I won't keep pointing out, well, there's a link, or at least I'll try to stop myself from continually, repetitively pointing out that all the things I do are as well researched as I can possibly make them. And I highly encourage you to read that research because it will give you memory exercise. It'll give you working memory exercise, and it'll give you some shot at long-term memory exercise because sometimes you remember or actively, purposefully memorize the names of the scientists, and then you can start helping yourself remember better because you practice memorizing this information, and that's one of the solutions. I know, another Captain Obvious statement. Practice memorizing things in order to have a better memory, but there it is. Anyway, there's some scientific work back in the 50s that said that time is the number one factor behind why our memories fade, and this is sometimes called the decay theory of forgetting. And the explanation basically matches a phrase that we use all the time. Use it or lose it. Now, use it or lose it doesn't sound all that scientific, but it is, really, at the end of the day. It's the underlying principle of more scientific sounding terms like deliberate practice, spaced repetition, active recall, etc. Those are all learning processes that help fight against the decay theory of forgetting. There's the forgetting curve that was proposed by Hermann Ebbinghaus, for example. That's a decay theory of forgetting, and time is the number one factor behind why memories fade, and then using the information is essentially the number one factor for making sure that it survives. Now, where memory techniques and memory training come in is that we know that levels of processing and elaborative encoding help make it stick much, much longer so that the forgetting curve is not able to make it decay nearly as quickly or as completely as it otherwise would. So there's a lot of interesting little nuances to all of this, and the number one thing that I can tell you that I think will help a lot of people is that a lot of people don't have enough contextual activity that reasserts the value of what you've learned in the past. So what do I mean by that? Well, I used memory techniques a lot when I did my PhD at York University. I used memory techniques a lot when I did my second MA at the European Graduate School. And one of the reasons why that those memory techniques have worked so well is not just because memory techniques are super powerful and amazing and awesome. That is part of how that it works, especially since I've improved my practice with memory techniques over time using the magnetic Mary method, which has features built into it that helps make things as strong as humanly possible. But there's also context. So I've continued to read philosophy, for example. I've continued to read media and communications theory, for example. So that's called deliberate practice, which is a term I just mentioned. And it also involves spaced repetition, which is another term I just mentioned. So I'm actively fighting against the decay theory of forgetting by leaning upon time as the number one factor behind why our memories fade. I continually reassert what I already know. And this has really nice effects to it. So it's easy for me. The other day I just memorized, I believe this is correct, proheresis. I'm not sure if my pronunciation is correct, but proheresis is a term, apparently, that Marcus Aurelius used in Meditations, or I think it's in Meditations. I don't know where else it would be, but that's what I believe the person that I was reading mentioned. And I memorized this term, and it means will or volition. And one of the reasons why it's so easy for me to remember that almost a week later since I read this, and I actually have my notebook here, so I'm going to check my memory right now and see if this is correct. But the reason why that it's so much easier for me to memorize this is because I'm often memorizing ancient Greek terms, right? And so, a prefix like pro is already has a strong position in my memory. And just the idea of the hair sound and rhesus sound, like rhesus monkeys, I study evolution a fair amount, and so monkeys with those names come up. Yes, here it is in my journal, proheresis, will, volition. And the other word from that day is hegemonikon, which means the command center of the brain. Anyways, what my point is that I'm deeply steeped in the study of philosophy, which brings back Greek terminology over and over and over again. So it's not just memory techniques. I did memorize it much, much better than I would have without memory techniques. I probably would have totally forgotten it and be like, what the heck was it? But I memorized that term on the train while I was reading John Cassian, and that's where this footnote came up. And I memorized that term. I thought it was so great. And I used the window in front of me on the train as the memory palace. And then I used spaced repetition to get it into long-term memory. But my point is that decay theory doesn't have such a strong effect on me personally because I'm always in the context of remembering information in the field that I focus on. So, what can you do to combat the decay theory of forgetting? Well, continue to use information, but also try to work within specific contexts. And you might be thinking, well, I want to know it all. I want to be in every single area that I possibly can be and just not have any focus because that sounds hard, etc. And that's normal. That's human. And, if you can get yourself to have that understanding and acknowledge it and recognize it, that's a really, really good thing. But a lot of us are essentially trying to do too much. We are trying to have it all. And there's a term I've come across in psychology, which is overfunctioning, right? So trying to take on every possible learning project leads to no learning project. In another area of information that I study, which has to do with meditation and mindfulness and so forth, sometimes it's said that in the Tibetan tradition or some of the Chinese meditation traditions, they try to focus on every single god and wind up with none. But in India, they focus on one Brahman or Brahman as the ultimate reality, and they wind up having it all, right? That's contextual focus. And if you were willing to just focus on one set of information, one category, one theme, one topic, you will wind up having so much more as a result. This can be hard to reckon, but it's true in many, many ways. And in the future, I'm going to be releasing a free game that will help you have areas of focus so that you get more out of limits. And I can't say more about that just yet, but watch this space. Make sure you're subscribed on my various media, my YouTube channels, the podcast channel, and the main Anthony Metivier channel. And you will have invitations to the game. And the game will have 7 categories, and you can mix and match and weave between them. but they're tightly enough focused that they're going to lead to less equaling way more, and they're going to have this repetition effect because your deliberate practice and your spaced repetition will be within a manageable topic area that touches so many things. Anyway, that's a number one reason why we forget. We're just not focused enough, and so we don't use it, and therefore we lose it. And one of the ways to not lose things is to be focused in individual topic areas. And this used to be much more common in our world, but we've had the splinterification. Is that a word? The splinterization, I guess, is probably the better term, of the internet, making everything just a storm of look over here and look over there and shiny object this and da-da-da-da-da, and we wind up with nothing. Well, I would encourage you to remember the ancient Greek phrase that shows up in The Matrix, great movie, know thyself. Know thyself. Are you really a creature who's happy and deeply satisfied by being dragged here, there, and the other place? Or is that self that you really want to experience a self of focus, of will, of volition, prohairesis, as Marcus Aurelius names it? Wouldn't you be so much more satisfied if you had that depth of focus? I predict that you would, although I think it's also just the way that it is that some people prefer to be yanked left, right, willy-nilly, and so forth. And, sometimes I like it too. I also like the internet. I sometimes worry I'm a little bit like a gadfly here, there, and the other place. But I do have an underlying structure and focus and strategy behind what I'm doing, even if it's not always successful. So far, so good. But I do protect my memory, and I memorize, and I focus and study within very specific categories of information, and that helps. Okay, so speaking of being pulled willy-nilly here, there, and the other place, interferences are another cause of forgetting, and for very specific reasons. So it's not just that being interrupted makes you forget, but that you are in scenarios where something else knocks the information from your mind. And there are granular details here. So there's a difference between trying to commit someone's name to memory and they start to tell you something else and it completely knocks their name from your mind. From a situation where you go, I need to go get the scissors, and you leave the room, and then all of a sudden you can't remember why you left the room. You get to the kitchen and it's like, what am I doing here? What did I come here for? Right? Now there's a relationship between those things because information left your mind. But the reason why the new information completely knocked the information out of your mind and made you forget is different. The stimuli is different, perhaps. So here's why it's different. If you hear someone's name and you're starting to memorize it, but they're already telling you something else, they're triggering your semantic memory in many ways because they're using your capacity for words. But if you leave your office to go and get scissors and you forget, it's more likely it's your sensory memory that's being hijacked because you have new gradations of light that your brain has to compensate for. You have new temperatures. You have new sensations beneath your feet, perhaps, because maybe you have a hardwood floor in your office and then you have carpet in the hallway. You can't underscore or underemphasize just what a big difference that your brain undergoes when you change situations. You might not feel it consciously, but I have every reason to believe from studies that I've read that you have competition going on always in your brain. Forget about the internet. We've always had competition going on, just moving from one room to the next. So it's a key explanation for why you keep forgetting things. Interference. But think about the different interferences. And, I can just share a quick anecdote from my world. When I go and give public presentations, I'm aware of just how many interferences can happen. There can be technological interferences. There can be unexpected questions. There can be a fire alarm. There can be all kinds of things that happen, right? So I prepare in advance for the known knowns that could possibly happen, but also the unknown knowns, which really involves casting a much wider net over how I engage in the game of life. Daily meditation, daily workouts. So I go to the gym 3 times a week typically, but Every day I do some Qigong in the morning, move around, stretching. This is very, very important. It helps deal with interferences. It helps build focus and concentration. I also walk backwards about 3 times a week. And this is known in some studies to help with focus, concentration. It's apparently good for your knees, which I think I've noticed. But I've just noticed that my walking backwards practice has helped with memory and helped with focus. How could it not help with focus? You have to pay attention when you're walking backwards. I've even made a video where I'm walking backwards and, I almost hurt myself because I was making a video and not concentrating entirely, but nonetheless, I didn't, thank goodness, and it wound up being a good teaching point, which is, know the path that you're walking along backwards. But in any case, the point is that if you're going to walk backwards, make sure it's safe and maybe see a doctor first. But I do it myself, and I'm not necessarily recommending it. I just do it myself because the evidence is there that walking backwards can improve focus, concentration, and memory. And you do still have the problem of interferences, such as, running into a bench, which is what happened to me. And it was a minor thing. I just wound up sitting on the bench unexpectedly. But I just wasn't paying attention. I normally walk a path that I know very, very well backwards, where there are no interferences, nothing to run into. And I got so into the message that I was recording that I just walked into a bench that I normally know was there, but quote unquote forgot. Why? Because I was interrupted or interfered with by my own passion for the message that I was giving. Anyway, no harm, no foul, and it did turn into a great teaching moment. Now, what's another reason that we forget things? Well, you could just have a retrieval failure. And the basic idea behind this is that we have to attempt to retrieve information from memory, and that comes with a secondary process, which is that if we get the answer, we have to process it somehow. So there's a lot going on. And one of the problems when you fail to retrieve things is that maybe you never processed the information enough to be able to retrieve it in the first place. So this has to do with reflective thinking, has to do with using mnemonics, it has to do with what your learning goals were in the first place, what your learning cycle looked like. It's not just about how memory works, but it's about how that you process things so you set the stage for being able to effectively retrieve it later. So, basically the clues are there. Have goals. Have your learning goals written down. Have a learning cycle process written down. Actually follow what it is that you have planned to do. Make time for reflective thinking. If you're using memory techniques, make sure that you're using elaborative encoding in a very detailed, disciplined way, and write things out from memory. Practice retrieval. That's part of active recall. So if retrieval failure happens to you, chances are that it wasn't processed with enough levels of processing in the first place. So don't beat yourself up about it. Just decide to do better next time. Use reflective thinking, schedule time for reflective thinking, and it will help you get improvement. And also, reflective thinking will help you get to the bottom of why you might not be taking action in the first place the way that you need to. It's very, very important to spend some time thinking about these things so that you can craft your own way past your own obstacles. Nobody else can do it for you. Certainly you can get coaching for it, but at the end of the day, you could also coach yourself and just get a journal and say, okay, here's where my issues are. Here's why I think I have these issues. What are the, if I was just going to coach myself, what are the top 5 solutions that would help me make progress? That process itself can help you get past things, right? And then it'll help you remember your obstacles and your solutions because you've processed them. So when you need to retrieve from memory your list of possible solutions to getting out of stuckness, well, you're going to be much more likely to retrieve those things from memory because you processed them properly in the first place, right? So easy peasy, lemon squeezy. The next reason that we forget is kind of unusual and psychological, and it's called motivated forgetting. Now, as strange as it might sound, sometimes people either forget on purpose or work very hard at trying to forget. Now, scientists don't yet fully understand motivated forgetting, but there's a study that is quite good on what it means, the neural mechanisms behind it, why various people want to shape or change or just get rid of ideas from the personal past or memories of things that happened. And it may have to do with, inhibitory control, trying to somehow get control over things. And it reduces, ultimately, prefrontal cortex activity, hippocampal and cortical activities when you try to suppress memories. So a lot of people, they email me, they say, Anthony, great that you help people remember, but how about forgetting? And I tell them about these studies because you don't want to reduce your hippocampal and cortical activity by suppressing your memories. Not at all. What you want to do is to be comfortable with unwanted memories. And if you're disturbed by unwanted memories, you want to be undisturbed by the fact that you were disturbed as quickly as possible. So repressing memories is not anything that I recommend, although I have tried to do it myself, and that's one of the reasons why I don't recommend it. What I did instead, in one case with a memory that bothered me all the time, was to use a memory palace to memorize a text in the home where the unwanted memory was taking place, so that I was no longer using motivated forgetting or even motivated to try to forget it. Because every time I would remember this, it just stung and it felt awful. And so by picking a particular text, memorizing it in the building where the bad memory took place, I was able to get past it. And it was so freeing. Unbelievably freeing. So wonderful. I wish I had done it sooner. But I didn't know. And we have to forgive ourselves for when we don't take action on certain things because, in the real world, or not that we're not talking about the real world here, but in the world of, say, the law, ignorance of the law is not an excuse. But in our world of personal improvement, getting better and better and better, not knowing techniques early, we can't beat ourselves up about that because we just didn't know. It's luck. It's so much luck involved in bumping into the right person at the right time who can help you cast light into the darkness of what you don't know. So thank you to everybody who helps share around the work that I'm doing because it helps more people find the light of the topic of memory and wind up just having a better life and a better world because better memory leads to better living. It just is easy as 1, 2, 3, and it's 2 + 2 = 4 territory. Obviously, if you have a better memory, you're going to have a better life, and then you are enabled to have a better memory still because you can start to organize your life because you remember the commitments that you make. You remember the steps that are involved in making progress towards completing the commitments that you've made, and things just get better and better and better. It's like a stock market of the mind that always goes up. It's wonderful. Okay, so another strategy that you can use here is to journal and reflective thinking so that you think about the memories that bother you, and you can put pros and cons and a line down the middle of the page and start to think, okay, so what were the good things about this situation that I want to forget so badly? What might be a positive that could come out of it? And then what are the cons if I don't deal with this? Like, what's going to happen if I just continue to hang on to all of this? Well, that may not be a thing that you're ready to do yet, but when you are ready to do, looking at things in your own handwriting about memories that you wish to forget or that you have already tried to forget can be a very freeing thing. So give those suggestions a try, and you may remove one of the major causes of forgetting from your life entirely, and it's very, very wonderful to be able to do that. Now, the next cause of forgetting is aging, and I definitely notice that I'm not as sharp as I was when I was younger, and that's a thing that I'm working on, and some days I feel even more sharper, and that's one of the reasons why I started walking backwards, actually, because I thought, well, now's the time. I've known about this research for a long time. Let's get started, and it certainly helps, but also memorizing daily helps, reading daily helps, etc. And also keeping in mind other people who have been really, really sharp. James Gerwing, he used the magnetic memory method to win the 2019 Canadian Memory Championship. And he was retired. I believe he retired that year that he won the competition. I also remember Tony Buzan, Harry Lorraine, fondly. They were so sharp in their 70s and their 80s. And ideally, I'll also be that sharp. In order to achieve that, I'll need to continually exercise my memory, take care of sleep, take care of physical fitness, take care of diet. But also, it helps to just have them as an image in the mind of what's possible. Tony Buzan told me, he said, always focus on what can go right. And so, yes, I know that Tony Buzan ultimately passed away, and, it's just the way things go. But for the life that he led and how that he was the last times that I spoke with him, well, he was sharp as a tack. So, it's still a good image to have in mind, even though, it is a bit of a tragedy that he left us in the way that he did. These things happen. And if you don't try to reach these kinds of goals or, keep Harry Lorraine in mind as the better outcome since he lasted longer and was still super sharp, well, then, pick the figure that makes sense to you. I pick all of them. I'm not going to choose one or the other. They just have a shining image of sharpness in their twilight years, so to speak. I don't know, like whatever terms you want to use. Just when I'm their age, I want to be as sharp as they were. I'm not going to get into nitpicking. Well, right? And it's the power of metaphor. So lots and lots of research that I've talked about before on the Magnetic Memory Method podcast about the power of metaphors for shaping your journey forward in order to get better results. And one is the Duke University study where people who pretended to be art thieves remembered more about an art gallery exhibition. Easy, right? And it's just proof of something that we've known a long time. The ancient Greeks talked about using personas, and Nietzsche talked about using personas in order to give yourself a shining light to follow. So aging can have an impact, but it doesn't have to when you attend to the physical realities of life, which are sleeping and fitness and diet, and you do what it takes to have better memory through using memory techniques, through contextual learning, like I talked about earlier today, and through having a guiding star image of how you would like to end up. Maybe you won't end up that way. Things can happen. But at least you know that you picked your star and you followed it. You went in that direction. That is powerful. All right. Another cause of forgetting is something Harry Lorraine, speaking of Lorraine, loved to point out. And he would say things like, there's no point in using memory techniques if you're not going to focus, not going to pay attention, right? How can information get encoded into your memory in the first place if you're not paying attention? Well, a lot of people struggle to pay attention. There is ADD, there is ADHD. Even myself, I have so many thoughts going on in my mind sometimes that it's easy to start thinking about what I'm going to say next in a conversation without actually listening to what is being said in the conversation I'm having as I'm having it. So one thing that I like to do is just repeat what people are saying to me in my mind so that there is no competition between their words and what I'm going to say next. Eckhart Tolle always points out in his talks that, you don't have to worry about what you're going to say next. You're going to say something, so, just pay attention to the now and then allow whatever comes out of you to come out of you without having to constantly organize it and orchestrate it and engineer it, And I think that's quite right. But how do you get there? Well, I would recommend memory-based meditation. And that's a big topic. I've talked about it before. It's the subject of The Victorious Mind, which is a book you can read that has specific memory-based meditation suggestions for you that bring in walking and breathing while you walk so that you get that fitness that we've talked about to combat aging effects on memory. And it's quite a package of materials. And I still practice all those things. Someone was asking me in a comment on my YouTube channel, do I still practice the pendulum breathing in that book that I talk about? And the answer is yes, but I practice many other types of breathing. And eventually I will have the follow-up to the Victorious Mind, where I share even more breathing techniques that I practice on an almost daily basis. When I say I practice Qigong, I do actual Qigong, but inside of that, or as part of that, there's also a good 15-20 minutes of specific breathing routines that you're going to maybe benefit from. I don't know for sure, but I've found them tremendously beneficial, and I wish that I had turned them into a habit stack much sooner, because they also have empowered and improved my digestion system, which is really great, because when we talk about paying attention, one of the number one reasons why a lot of us struggle to pay attention is that we have pain, we have physical discomfort. And so these breathing things have helped me have less physical discomfort, and that leads to more paying attention in the moment. So I know this can sound like a lot of things that you have to work on. Oh, I got to work on breathing now, and oh, I got to work on diet, and I got to work on sleep and health, and I got to learn memory techniques and all this. Is it really that many disciplines? I suggest not, but it can feel that way, right? So try to get out a piece of paper, describe the life that you want to live, think about the small set of things you need to do in order to start moving yourself in that direction, have a guiding star metaphor, and, don't try to reproduce anybody else's journey. That's a point that Gary Weber makes in Happiness Beyond Thought. A very good point. And when I talk about, having Harry Lorraine and Tony Buzan in mind, I don't mean that I want to live their lives or reproduce their lives. I just have them as a general metaphor that is the image of living well throughout the scope and the arc of one's life. But, you just really, really want to have some sort of journey to follow, right? Describe it for yourself and pay attention to it in a better way by actually doing it, by actually going through the exercise. And then you pay attention to what it's like to do the exercises. And this will exercise your ability to pay attention. And then you can try that trick that I use. When people are talking to me, I repeat what they're saying to me in my head. And I don't do it all the time, but I do it when I find that my mind is skipping away. So very, very powerful and empowering to do. But find whatever way works for you to pay more attention, because the more attention you pay, the more you're going to be able to remember without even using memory techniques. But you'll also be able to use memory techniques to information that is incoming, so you can remember books that people mention by title. You can remember names of people as they're mentioned to you, and just generally be able to use memory techniques on the fly. It's very, very wonderful and powerful to be able to do that. Okay, so what else? Well, I've sort of already mentioned this, which is, deal with your stress and your trauma. And I shared that I memorized something in a Mary Palace that helped me reduce suffering from a memory that used to just make me feel terrible every time that it came up. But let me share another angle to this, or deepen the point. Tim Dalglish has wonderful research on this, where he shows that using memory palaces specifically helped people with PTSD and with depression not have such terrible effects from those conditions. And I think that's ultimately what happened to me when I was in grad school, long before I knew about this research, and indeed before the research was even conducted. So it was 2003 when I started grad school, and the Dalglish research about memory palaces helping people with depression was not released until 2013. So it was just interesting. And, often science catches up with things that have been true for thousands of years. And that's just something to really think about. If you have stress-induced forgetting, see if you can address the trauma that is causing it, or just address the stress itself by bringing together a practice that is not just memory training, but memory training embedded in the context of everything we've talked about today. Some health, sleep, exercise, attention that we could all use. Diet. There's so many things in our diets that just cause forgetting. And the problem is there's no way that I can say, okay, here's the specific diet that's going to work for memory. It doesn't work that way. You literally need to get in and do the work of figuring out what foods bother you, because foods that bother John are not necessarily the foods that bother Sandy. So you got to work that out for yourself. But it can be that some people have trauma just around food itself. And this leads to things like motivated forgetting. So they want to not change their diet, so they forget the fact that they eat in bad ways because they're trying to actually never be remembered of things that, are traumatic for them. Anyway, I don't mean to try to psychoanalyze anybody, but at the end of the day, these things can be solved with memory work, or at least they can be impacted positively by memory work. And I strongly encourage you to just get in there and deal with your stress and trauma and read the Dalgleish research. And what he's saying is, or the implications of what he's saying, that I've used to great effect since I first read this, it made my practice even better with memory techniques, is to create something like a happy memory palace. And in this happy memory palace, what you do is you have 5 to 10 happy memories. So let's say your memory palace has an office, a bedroom, a kitchen, and the front entrance, right? Well, in your office, you're going to have one happy memory. In my case, when I did this, I had a memory of the day that I finished my PhD, and we had gone downstairs to a pub at York University campus called The Absinthe, and I just started performing magic tricks with a deck of cards to the people who were on my committee. This is such a happy memory for me because I love performing magic, and I love that I've actually successfully finished my PhD. And then I go to the next part of the memory palace and I trigger off another happy memory. And I find that if I'm ever down or feeling glum or stressed, if I just go into this happy memory palace and start triggering off those memories, I never have to go to the end of the journey to start feeling better. I'm just reminded of what an amazing, yes, troubled, sometimes dramatic, unexpected things happen in life. But what a blessing, to have running water and a roof over my head and the ability to actually read the books that led to a PhD in the first place, to be around so much wonderful knowledge, to have such incredibly gifted and talented and giving professors. Wow, that one memory of just doing magic tricks for my graduate committee, it's just wild. It's so much fun. And you certainly have at least one memory like that in your life that you could stick in a memory palace. And then when times get tough or you feel down or you don't have motivation to do the things that you know you need to do, well, you just enter that memory palace and then you go from one happy memory to the next, or even just the one happy memory if you can only find one. Heck, maybe you have a happy memory of listening to one of these podcasts. I don't know. I mean, I'm not trying to be egotistical here, but some people say they like the show. And if that's you, please make sure to review it and share it around. Have happy memories one way or the other and put them in memory palaces. And that's another thing. If you absolutely cannot find a single happy memory, go out and have new happy memories. And I hope listening to this program helps give you some happy memories, even if it's just the kindling or the spark that leads to them. Because what else would we find as the foundation for making life better, if not memory? Memory is a series of engines that help us experience the world and help us remember what we experience so that we can navigate it better moving forward. That's what this creature is, memory. And it's a very complex and strange and wonderful substance, if we can think of it that way. Isn't that a compelling metaphor, to think of memory as a kind of substance? I think of it in that sense as a kind of space. Megaston topos hapantagar kori, said Thales thousands of years ago. Space is ultimate because it contains all things. Well, how could a thing contain other things if it wasn't a substance? I mean, maybe it can. These are all metaphors. And what's producing these metaphors? It's memory, right? It's memory that actually brings it to our minds. And it's memory that allows me over here to speak to you over there. And it manages the meaning of the symbols, you and me. And when we get together and to talk about memory, we're not separate, really. We're one, because the transmission of information from consciousness over here to consciousness over there is so fast and seamless due to essentially the alphabet living in both of our minds and snapping together like mental Lego in real time, so that you know what I'm saying, and even if I'm sometimes unclear, you have a path to working out what it is that I'm trying to say. This is miracle territory. So maybe that's something you want to practice remembering. Megaston topos, hapantagar kori, space is ultimate because it contains all things. That is one of my guiding metaphors. It is one of my guiding stars to experience as much space in my mind as possible so that that space can contain as many things as possible, magnetically attracting that information to stick in place. So I'm able to retrieve it when I want to because I have remembered to do the things that process the information appropriately so that it is, in fact, retrievable in the future. And there's another part of the magnetic method metaphor, which is magnetic memory method has the word magnetic in it because magnets also repel. Repel what? They repel distractions. They repel interferences because we pick a goal and we stick with that goal. And if you need help with picking goals and sticking with goals, previous podcasts on this show have lots of information there. Look up learning cycles, look up learning goals, and you will be rewarded. And you will learn more about how to stop forgetting things once and for all because you have strategies that I've used quite successfully, and I have every reason to believe that those strategies will continue to be successful for a long time to come. So thanks for joining me on this episode of the Magnetic Memory Method podcast. Come visit me at magneticmemorymethod.com for more material like this for the free course over there. And I am doing some really interesting things going forward. I'm going to revive an ancient book here quite soon. I'm almost done editing it, and I'm going to record an audiobook version of it for you. So stay tuned for notification of that. It is The Phoenix by Peter of Rowena, and I'm very excited to release that. And there is a gamified learning experience coming that has a little bit to do with Peter of Rowena and his book, The Phoenix. But my book is not exactly The Phoenix, but something called Phoenix Reborn. And until next time, further news awaits on those projects, but please get involved. Be part of the Magnetic Memory Method world at magneticmemorymethod.com. And as always, until we have a chance to speak again, thank you and keep yourself magnetic.